President Donald Trump pulled the rug out from under Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump offered blistering criticism of Putin's leadership in Russia's war against Ukraine. Let's watch what Trump told reporters on Monday.
I have to speak to President Putin. We're going to have to find out. He can't be thrilled. He's not doing so well. I mean, he's grinding it out, but most people thought that war would have been over in about 1 week. And now you're into 3 years, right? So he can't be thrilled. It's not making him look very good. We have numbers that almost 1 million Russian soldiers have been killed. About 700,000 Ukrainian soldiers are killed. Russia's bigger, they have more soldiers to lose. But that's no way to run a country.
Now, that struck some observers as different in tone from what he said 2 years ago about Putin. Let's watch.
I went in yesterday and there was a television screen, and I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. So Putin is now saying it's independent, a large section of Ukraine. I said, how smart is that? And he's going to go in and be a peacekeeper. That's the strongest peace force. We could use that on our southern border. That's the strongest peace force I've ever seen. There were more army tanks than I've ever seen. They're going to keep peace all right.
So what impact will Trump have on Putin's approach to the nearly 3-year war between Russia and Ukraine? Here to weigh in is retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, host of the Deep Dive with Daniel Davis YouTube show. Welcome, Lieutenant Colonel.
Thanks for having me back.
So let's just immediately get your response to what President Trump said in those new remarks about Vladimir Putin. What do you think?
Well, he's now, not just somebody from the outside just kind of weighing in, but now he's got the mantle of authority and the power, and now also the responsibility of bringing something in to fruition. And, as he said, really even in the couple of weeks before taking office, that he said, yeah, this is a lot harder than I think the Middle East, which ironically is in comparison, he thinks is less difficult, which just shows that he understands that this is going to be a lot more complicated than he had thought or hoped. And I think that what he wants to do is to just get this mess off the table in the least negative way possible, and then move on to things that are probably a higher priority for him. But it's not going to be easy because of the disastrous way the Biden administration prosecuted this war. He has a very weak hand for negotiations. And if anybody thinks that because he's got this great reputation as a deal maker, he's going to come in and create something out of nothing and to hand Ukraine and Kiev something that it can be happy with, I think they're going to be sorely disappointed, because I think the bigger risk is that Russia comes in and says, we don't have to negotiate anything. We can just keep fighting until we capture everything by force of arms that we want, which obviously makes the Trump side in a much more vulnerable position.
I think a lot of advocates for peace, for instance, in the Middle East, sympathetic people for the plight of the Palestinians, some were taken by surprise at the speed at which President then-elect Trump's negotiators were able to press Netanyahu to make a deal, the same deal that had been on the table for months, that he had rejected when Biden was in charge. And Trump was able to press him to do that and is getting a lot of credit for it. Similarly, is it possible to press Vladimir Putin to accept some kind of deal, peace, etc., with Zelensky to bring this catastrophic war to a halt? Trump's instincts are in many ways what he said in his remarks on Monday. He used the word, world peace a lot. I think his instincts are very against war, certainly as a first resort, maybe more so than, frankly, other Republican figures have been in the past. But what does he have, in his negotiating toolkit to have Putin say, you know what, this has gone on long enough, here's what I want, and let's have it be done?
Yeah, well, first of all, you got to look at what actually did happen in the Israel-Hamas situation. And first of all, we don't really know what was agreed to behind the scenes from Trump's envoy there that got it done. But we do see that some of the comments coming out of the Israeli government have said that once they get their hostages back, that they plan on returning to the offensive because they said Hamas is still not destroyed. So this could be just Trump's way of working with Netanyahu and saying, all right, we're going to give you some stuff, but I need something first. I said that we were going to, there was going to be hell to pay if the hostages weren't back by the time I came into office. I need that to happen. That has happened now. But it remains very much an open question of whether that war itself is going to be resolved anytime soon or not. So the jury's out on that one. In the situation with the Russia-Ukraine war, he has a lot less leverage for Vladimir Putin, because Putin has been very clear just in the last 24 hours of saying, yes, I'm happy to talk to the incoming administration. I congratulate Trump, but we have to address the core issues that are involved here, the core causes of this war. And he specifically said there won't be any ceasefire. There's not going to be any kind of pause in the fighting. We want a negotiated settlement to permanently end this. And that has to include all the things that we have said, which is all of the territorial acquisitions that we annexed in 2022, which right now the Ukraine still possesses some of that. So they're saying until you negotiate away more land than what the Ukraine has already lost in the war, we're just going to keep fighting. And so Trump doesn't really have any real cards to play on that. He said last night that if there's no ceasefire, he may use some sanctions. But really, at this point, what is sanctions going to do to Russia? I think they've seen that tired old play before, and it's not going to move them.
So if you believe that Putin has the advantage in a number of ways, including general advances on the battlefield, but also a greater reluctance of the United States to shore up Ukraine, or a lack of leverage on President Trump's part, does that mean that this just ends with Putin taking either all or most of Ukraine? I mean, how do you actually see this war ending other than an effective surrender to the Russian objectives?
Now, if you take the emotion out of it and take out of what we would like to happen and look at just the fundamentals and the power dynamics and the balance between the two sides that exist, that's pretty close to what we're looking at. Trump will have the opportunity, and the Russians are willing, because they do have a willingness and a desire to have a negotiated settlement. They would much rather take by diplomacy what they feel is their minimum requirements for their national security. But if they don't, they'll take it by force. And that's the real problem. There's no good solution here. There's no happy outcome. There's not even a good one from the side of the Ukraine side. We lost that opportunity in April 2022 in Istanbul, and in November 2022, when we now, according to the New York Times, just a few days ago, know that former Secretary of State Blinken sabotaged a deal that could have resulted in a negotiated settlement at Ukraine's advantage at that time. So now then, Trump's just left with the Russian armed forces are significantly stronger than the Ukraine side is. The Ukraine side is now not even able to force mobilize enough to offset losses, which means they are literally being ground to dust, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. It doesn't matter if sanctions. It doesn't matter if Trump gives a bunch more equipment. The Ukraine doesn't have the manpower to even hang on. So you're either going to have a negotiated settlement that's to Moscow's advantage, or you're going to probably have an outright military defeat somewhere probably close to the Dnieper River, maybe even later in 2025. But I don't see any military way to avoid that outcome.
Well, then we would hope it would be, I mean, this is still not a great scenario, but if Russia truly designs to conquer the whole country, then Ukraine is going to say, well, then you have to conquer the whole country. You have to take it by force, and there'll be a lot more deaths on both sides. Perhaps they can have, yes, a negotiated settlement favorable to Russia, but short of the entire country going under Russian control. We hope Trump.
Well, but I'll tell you, the danger in that thinking, if that's what anybody in Europe is thinking, or Zelensky, is that assumes that their armed forces can continue to stay viable all the time they're shrinking down. But history tells us that there is some point to where the will to fight just collapses. And then if there's a physical breakthrough somewhere in the line, and Russia has the power to affect this, then the whole thing can collapse. And now all of a sudden you have no more armed forces to have. And you got to understand, from the perspective of the fighting man on the Ukraine side, why do they want to continue sacrificing their life to lose slowly? I think that's not a safe prospect if that's what Zelensky's thinking.
Lieutenant Colonel, thank you so much for providing your expertise. We appreciate it.
Always my pleasure. Thank you.